Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the Hive's Think Tank webinar series. So my name's Olivia, and I'm the operations manager at the Hive, and we're super excited to have you join us and hear from our expert panel of speakers from Westwave Capital, Palo Alto Networks, and Arista Networks. So with that being said, I'm just going to quickly go over some of today's best practices for the webinar and explain what the Hive Think Tank does, and then I'll pass it over to Ravi, the Hive's founder and managing director. So we love questions, and we would love for the audience to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask our presenters any questions, which they'll answer throughout the webinar and also more kind of towards the last 5-10 minutes of the panel discussion. And lastly, the session is being recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel. And I'll also share out the link afterwards for those who aren't able to stay for the entirety of the event. So with that, let me just talk quickly about the Hive Think Tank. So the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of thought leaders, corporations, and entrepreneurs. We're an event and content platform with a focus on AI, 5G, blockchain, Web3, enterprise, security, and so much more. We do host events almost every other week on cutting edge topics and technology and business, as well as publish kind of corresponding thought pieces. And we love for the audience to kind of join our events and stay up to date with our meetup group and also our newsletter. So I'll go ahead and link that in the group chat after the presentation is over. I also like to thank our sponsors, Avanta Ventures and Gamuda, for their support. And for our audience, if you are interested in getting involved with the Hive Think Tank, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is olivia@hivedata.com, and also follow along and contribute to our social media using the hashtag HiveData and @HiveData on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Ravi, our managing director, to talk more about the Hive and introduce our amazing panel speakers.
Thank you all for joining today. A little bit about the Hive. Hive is an early stage fund and a venture studio, very focused on leveraging data and AI-driven startups. You can see kind of the different domain areas where we primarily focus in, and one of the key areas is security and privacy. We are a pre-seed and seed stage investors, and typically writing checks between $1.5 million and $3 million. Next slide, please. So we are in our fourth fund here in the US, covering kind of US and Canada. We're a very kind of high touch, operationally active support for entrepreneurs. And we have used the same model to create funds and entities in Brazil, India, Southeast Asia, based in Malaysia, and in the early part of next year, we're planning the Hive in Europe. Next slide, please. I'm excited today to introduce my good friend Rahul Kashyap. Rahul has been an advisor to the Hive for many years, has been very actively involved in a number of our companies, especially security companies. Rahul is currently at Arista Networks. He was the CEO of Awake. He just has a long history in the security space at Bromium, at Cylance, at McAfee. And so, but please ask your questions using the Q&A button. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rahul, who will moderate the conversation.
Thank you, Ravi, and good morning, good afternoon, all. I'm happy to moderate the session with some top-notch folks from the industry. As Ravi mentioned, I've been in this cybersecurity space for over 2 decades, and boy, it has been a ride. I would say ever since one thing has been constant in cybersecurity, and that is change. It's a very fast-paced environment, a lot of innovation, a lot of challenges. and I look forward to covering some of those in this panel. Before we get started, I would like some of our panel to have some of our panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Gaurav.
Great, thank you, Rahul. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So, quick background on myself. I'm a software engineer turned entrepreneur turned VC. So I've gone over to the dark side, as people say. I started my career as an engineer at Oracle and then at VMware. And in 2010, I left VMware to start one of the first companies in the multi-cloud management space. The company was called Clicker Technologies. It was backed by Foundation Capital and Google Ventures. Clicker got acquired by Cisco in 2016. And for some time, I was at Cisco leading engineering for their cloud business. And most recently, I joined Westwave Capital in 2019 as a venture capitalist, as an investor in early stage startups. As a firm, we're kind of like the Hive. We like to invest in very early stage, pre-seed and seed stage startups in enterprise B2B areas. So these include things like SaaS, analytics, IoT, cloud, which is my background, and then also security. I think our cloud security and cybersecurity portfolio has been very important. About 25% of the portfolio is in security. So it's a space that continues to excite us. We like investing in this space and have had some good early exits as well.
Thank you, Gaurav. That's great. I'll definitely have some fun questions being an investor in these times.
Yeah.
Ankur, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Rahul. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Ankur, Senior Vice President of Product at Palo Alto Networks. I joined the company 4 years ago, came through one of the many acquisitions Palo Alto Networks made. I run our cloud security product portfolio called Prisma Cloud. Been in security for a little over a decade, was a builder, never moved to the dark side like Gaurav did, still a builder at heart. And looking forward to having some good conversation with friends and colleagues in the industry on some of the recent trends in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Perfect, Ankur. So let me kind of start off. It's been a wild couple of years. We all know that, right? I won't talk about that in more details. But being an investor, Gaurav, my first question is to you. Like, what is your current thesis for investing in cyber stocks? Because the market is so skewed, right? If you look at the large growth companies, their valuations have become very different now than what it was 1 year ago. So when you're looking at a small early stage startup, so what's your thesis?
So, I'm happy to share some of the thesis areas, Rahul, but I think as an early stage investor, when we look at the current market conditions, they don't really impact early stage investors because, startups are a long-term game. Building out a viable company takes more than just a couple of years. And, who knows how deep and long this particular downturn, this particular recession might be. But we are looking at startups that are viable for the long term. And so we kind of set aside the market conditions and just look at the fundamentals of a company when we look at investing. So, we look at the team, we look at the product, we look at the innovation, the market size. And that's really what matters when investing at the early seed stage. Now, I think later stage investors look at it very differently because their time horizon is shorter. They might be looking at earlier exits. And for them, I think looking at the market conditions is a lot more relevant than for seed investors like us. And, it's almost a cliche now. Many people say this, that some of the best companies have been formed during downturns. If we go back to the 2008, 2010 downturn, that's around the time when I started my company as well. It's actually a great time to build. So, that's how we look at investments. We're actually very actively investing in our fund. We're making about new investment every month. So I don't think we treat cybersecurity any differently, other than the fact that cybersecurity is a very crowded space. I don't know how CISOs deal with this, but I would hate to be a CISO. Their RSA is literally a zoo with thousands of vendors, and they all kind of say the same things. How do you differentiate one security vendor versus another? So, foremost, when we look at security companies, I think even if we set the thesis aside, it's really important to make sure that the company is really innovative and can set itself aside in this very crowded market. So, with that sort of background, Rahul, I'm happy to share a few areas that are of interest to Westwave. I have like 5 on my list here. Three are sort of generic, which I think are general trends in the market. Other investors are also looking at this areas. We have all heard about, shift left in security. As a software engineer, I've been guilty of this. I wasn't really worried about security when writing code. And the earlier security can be top of mind when writing software applications, I think security is going to be so much easier for all of us. And, people have been talking about shift left for quite some time. I believe we're still in the early innings. Within shift left, if we start looking at areas like software supply chain attacks, which have now become a lot more relevant, I think shifting left in that becomes also important, integrating that with the development processes, CI/CD, making sure your supply chain integrity is there. I think that's an area of interest. But again, with a word of caution, that's an area where there's been a slew of investments very recently. So if you're thinking about starting a company in those areas, you have to really make sure that your approach is differentiated and can stand out. So I'd say that's one area. Post-COVID, another area that's become really important, I feel, is that remote work, hybrid work is here to stay. I think the old days of everybody being behind the firewall on premises, that's just not going to be there. And so the world's got a lot more complex. People are bringing their own devices, they're working from different locations. So in this hybrid remote work, I think things like zero trust become even more important. Again, it's an over-abused word, zero trust, but it becomes a reality in this post-COVID environment. I think a third area for me, especially close to my heart, is cloud security. I think the kind of solutions we have seen in cloud security in the past have been siloed to one aspect of cloud. It might be cloud security posture management, CSPM, which I'm sure Ankur is going to talk about, very relevant to Palo Alto Networks, CWPP, or cloud identity and access management. But I think the next wave in cloud security is going to be, as the attack surface is increasing, how all of these can come together to provide a more holistic cloud security solution to customers. I think most sort of attacks start with maybe an identity, which leads to some other vulnerability, which in turn leads to some data leak or data access. And one single tool might not be able to solve that problem. One silo tool, you kind of have to cut across those different domains. So I think those are three trends that we are watching very closely. I would maybe point out two other trends, which I'm not seeing a lot of interest from other investors, but definitely of interest to Westwave Capital. When we look at security, I think we often have the tools and technology. It's not a tool and technology problem, it's a people and process problem. And that's something that's been mostly overlooked, right? I worked in large corporations and there's a security training program and so forth and so on. But I feel that there's a lot more that can be done on the people and process aspect of security. So are there ways where every citizen, every denizen can be a better cyber citizen? And it's not just something that we are relying on security teams, on the CISO teams to provide security. So I think there's something to be done there in terms of, I would call it human detection and response, better human security. That's an area that's of interest to us. Another area that's become of more interest recently is maybe Web3 and blockchain security. I think it's an open question whether Web3 is going to take off or not, but there's enough movement in that market. And I think it's an area where the incumbent vendors might not be focused on as of yet, but it's definitely one that is seeing a lot more activity. So, those are just some trends and areas that we are looking at.
Great. That's fantastic, and thank you for that, Gaurav. I'll come to Ankur in a bit, but I have one more follow-up question to what you mentioned just now. So looking at early stage companies, right? So between a pitch to executing and building on a complete company, right? Mm-hmm. The gap is pretty huge, right? And very few people can really cross the chasm, right? So how do you determine, and what are the ingredients that you're looking for in people and teams to basically, which convinces you to take the bet early on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's always hard to determine. I wish I had sort of the secret sauce to know if this team can really execute or not. But execution is key. I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's really how you execute an idea that makes the difference at the end of the day. Especially in cybersecurity and security, I feel that the team's pedigree, their experience, having done and delivered in the past is really important, right? I mean, there are other areas where, for example, you might have worked in one SaaS application and you're switching domains and building something very different. That might be possible in SaaS, But I think in security, having a very deep background, deep experience really matters. So that's one thing that we look for. For early stage, it's kind of an art. Later stage investors can look at track record, financials, tracking history to make decisions. But for us, we look at soft signals. We look at, for example, how comprehensive the presentation of a team is. If they're thinking about a new product, new idea, how deeply have they thought about it? How have they thought about the approach? Is it just something up in the air? Do they have architecture diagrams in place? How deeply can they think about it? So we look at soft signals like those when it comes to evaluating the possible, viability of execution. I think another thing that we look very closely at when we look at startups is it's not just technology or product. What matters a lot is GTM execution, go-to-market execution. One of my advisors at my startup used to say that a great product without good GTM is, that company might not succeed, but you might have an average product with great GTM and you might be very, very successful. So we also look at the GTM aspect, how grounded are the founders, especially technical founders, when it comes to realizing how hard or easy is it going to be to sell a security product. How do you get a meeting with a CISO? Most CISOs don't even read their emails. In fact, they would blacklist a vendor sometimes if you're sending them too many emails. So have they figured out in innovative ways in which they can find insertion points in the market? So that, comprehensiveness of the thinking process, the thought process is really important when we evaluate cybersecurity startups.
Great, very helpful, Gaurav. Thanks. Ankur, so let's, I think look like you are in the midst of all the fun and action in cloud security. As Gaurav said, this is definitely where all the action is happening. So what are the top trends that you are seeing in cloud security?
Yeah, just before I get into this, one of the things that Gaurav mentioned stood out to me. Like, there's so many cybersecurity vendors. How do even the CISOs pick one product? Well, the answer is they pick them all. It's the unfortunate reality in our business. I was talking to a CISO, it's one of the largest financial institutions, and I go like, how many tools do you have? And he goes like, I got 120 security tools in total. I said, why do you have that? He goes, we have a no vendor left behind policy. Such is the reality right now. It's incredibly crowded. And that sort of really piggybacks into, Rahul, your question, which is, look, one of the big trend is whether it's cloud security, security in general, you're going to see a lot of platform consolidation, especially as the post-COVID hangover gets over, like the party's over. It's time to the basics. Customers are looking for platforms. One of the things I wanted to touch upon and Gaurav mentioned was the next gen cloud security is code to cloud security. And again, this is what Prisma Cloud, and we talk a lot about it, which is like if you're building a cloud native application, it doesn't matter whether it's in the code phase or the run phase, it's code to cloud security. So lots of platform, thinking about things holistically versus buying a whole bunch of point product and stitching it together. And then Gaurav touched upon other critical areas, because of, and we'll talk about this later, hopefully, but because of White House mandate on supply chain security, I think there's more awareness. The modern supply chains are complicated, like people kind of knew that intuitively, but now when it becomes very real with code cover and a whole bunch of other supply chain attacks, people are understanding like, okay, I've got like 100 tools hanging off of my CI/CD pipeline. I mean, and everybody's got my code secret. Everybody's got my cloud account secret. Like, why don't we protect that pipeline that goes between everything else? So I think there's a lot of emphasis in that. And the last thing I'll say is that, look, 5 years ago, DevOps movement and shift left is not a new thing. DevOps has been around for a while. The change is now in the conversation I'm having. I'm now, I rarely meet CISOs and security teams anymore that say like, I hate them, the application team, and they break stuff. They're all saying now we're enablers. So I see that sort of security and DevOps partnership is becoming real. And to be honest, I'm yet to meet with any developers who says like, I don't want to do security. It's just the security is so kludgy and complicated and in the face, and it's a productivity killer. So I think the technologies that can bridge that gap between the two is going to be winning play. So those are some sort of high level ideas that we can certainly riff on more over the course of this conversation.
Great. And then the pandemic has resulted in a lot of changes in how enterprises look at the cloud, right? So is there anything in particular that caught your attention? Because, as you said, last 5 years were very different. Last few years were really different, right? So do you think, and are any of these trends likely to stay, or is it just like a short-term thing which was forced on us?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, again, no surprise to any of our listeners, but in all the secular trends that we knew were happening, they all got decade worth of automation and cloud migration happened in 2 years. Again, no surprise, right? Like everybody's automating, etc. Your question is sort of, hey, like is post-COVID hangover sort of stalling? Look, up until the recent announcements and earnings report by AWS, GCP, and Azure, these guys were all putting up like staggering numbers, 25, 30, 40% year-over-year growth with $150 billion in run rate business across all three major CSPs. So there was no slowing down up until a quarter ago. Now the macro headwinds are going to impact just about everybody, but if you really look at the average CIO, and if you ask them, you got to cut down everything. You got to go back on basics and protein and bananas, like basic diet. You can't have buffets anymore. They're going to say, if I got to pick two, they're going to pick public cloud automation and security. So that's what the bones represent. So I feel pretty optimistic in long term. There's going to be a little bit of a sobering event where people kind of start thinking this through, but there's no stopping this thing. I mean, there's $1 trillion worth of disruption that is waiting to happen, and it will happen. It's just there's a little bit of a blip in that journey.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think, and that's I would say most interesting thing about security is that it's ever changing. The threat landscape keeps on changing. So, and that's one of the reasons why you see so many companies trying to solve all of those problems. And then it's very hard to have one company that does it all, right? So that's also one more challenge where you cannot have a single pane of glass for everything that you have in the Uber cyber, basically, right?
I think the only thing I'll say to that, Rahul, is that look, I mean, I've only been in security for over a decade, so I mean, I know people who have been there 30 years, and I've been predicting for the last 10 years. I'm like, come on, man, like this 3,000 security companies is unsustainable, and the consolidation hasn't taken place. I think there are green shoots. Palo Alto is a $50 billion company. CrowdStrike is there. Zscaler is a $25 billion company. We're now starting to see that. Like 5 years ago, the largest company in cybersecurity had like 10 billion, less than 10 billion in market cap, 2% market share. So we're starting to see some of that consolidation. I think that, look, the startup ecosystem is going to be thriving. It's just that everybody's starting to scare the CISOs away with their next-gen, super advanced ninja security. That shit's going to go away. And real technology and stuff will prevail.
Right. Yeah, I can totally imagine how it is being a CISO. All my CISO friends always joke about it in the back end that I just don't read my emails. I don't use my phone anymore, right? So and that thanks to all of these mostly new incoming companies, right, who are trying to show the latest and greatest. So changing tracks a little bit, right? So we talked briefly about the government and the role of government and the influence, right? So what? First of all, what is your view of the role of government in cybersecurity? Should they be playing a hand? So far, internet has been this free space for people to exchange ideas and so on. But as you see that it's not been working that well, right? So now government is beginning to step in. So first of all, what's your view about the role of government? Do you think government should be involved in more regulations, more compliance? First, second. And then, do you think that the industry is prepared for some of these rules and regulations which are being talked about?
Yeah, maybe, look, I can, assuming this was for me, is US Inc., well, the government is, pretty well prepared right now. There's been a, pretty good public-private partnership, a lot of visibility, a lot of the government agencies, NSA, FBI, CISA, DHS, they're collaborating. And so from a nation-state attack, again, anything could go wrong. Generally, I feel pretty good about it. I think US Inc., we're well prepared as we could be. But to answer your first question, Biden admin obviously recently launched this whole S-bomb initiative. I think that awareness is important. You'd be surprised. Look, I talked to some of the largest financial institutions, healthcare companies. Some of them have awareness about security. They know what to do. But you'd be surprised. There are like swaths of company where they have no idea. And they're just trying to check a box. Like, I got to get auditors off of my back. I got to check this PCI box. I think people need to get into the mindset that security is just going to be part of your P&L. Like you got to just have that. So I think to me, the Biden admin's move was a good one. I think it generates more awareness, not to check box, but to really help customers secure the infrastructure and application. So I think it's positive. I feel good about it in general with US, but again, the nation state attacks are here to stay. We got to be more prepared and one up the adversary.
Okay. And Gaurav, I would say the same question to you. Like, what do you think about the role of the government? Do you think it's a good thing, and how far should they take the upper hand in terms of defining controls?
I mean, I think the government can definitely lead the way in terms of setting the standards that everybody else can look up to, right? I think government's one of the most important security buyers and security practitioners in our government particularly. So they can definitely lead the way. And as an interesting example, one of the changes that I've seen in the startup world is when startups are selling to, in the past, it was typically the government customers that would require compliance to be met first. And the typical enterprise wouldn't want that of a startup. But even early stage startups nowadays are required to get PCI, SOC 2, ISO in Europe very early on. And so I think all those changes are for the good. And the government has been definitely instrumental in leading the way there.
Right. And I think I concur with both of you. I think one of the biggest challenges, what I have seen being in the industry also, is that cybersecurity has always been an afterthought, right? And that's why this is such a big problem. Now, with the government stepping in, I think a lot of people really need that help. Like the really big corporations, they're probably fine, but then there are a lot more who really need guidance and help. Initially, I was very skeptical about it, but I think they have made some very good moves overall, which is, I would say, definitely positive and good for the overall overarching industry. But let's see how this plays out. Rules are great. It's all about implementation as we speak. So I'm sure the next few years will be interesting in how all of this rolls out and how this plays out, right? So talking about controls and governments and nation states, let's talk about something what's really going on right now, which is, there's a war going on in not too far from here. So what are your views? Do you think that this cyber war, the war could escalate into a cyber war at some point? And do you think that the enterprises and the various governments are prepared to counter that? Gaurav, you can go first. Yeah.
I mean, I think we might already be in a cyber war. So, I think the geopolitical climate worldwide is definitely making the need for security more important than ever before. And I think one of the reasons that you're seeing VCs like us invest a lot more in security startups is because of that changing macro climate. Security, would have not been as large a portfolio, share of portfolio for somebody like us. But given how important it has become, it's a growing market, it's a growing need. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that nation state attacks are increasing. We saw that with the Colonial Pipeline, the Log4j attack. So a lot of these things are sort of accelerating the need for even more stringent security practices to be in place.
Yeah, not a lot to add to what Gaurav said. I agree. If anything, we have our Unit 42 team and we help customers, and obviously we can't go into the specifics. But last 9 months, maybe a year, there's just been a rise of ransomware attack where we're helping customers. It's a pretty organized crime, very professionally done, but there's just a rise of that. Unfortunately, I don't see it ebbing anytime soon. You're trying to protect and safeguard against rogue actors. Just no matter how good you are defensively, I mean, you just have to keep at it, given technology, given the rate of the speed. And look, the other thing is that this whole, especially in public cloud, the public cloud is, kind of level playing field. The developers are bringing their favorite service, favorite cloud providers whenever they want. And decentralization is the name of the game. That's why blockchain, everything is so popular, decentralization. But it's kind of wild, wild west. So we can talk about security and how many, but it's like nobody knows. Half the time, security has no idea which service is deployed in production, right? And you can't have it both ways. You can't have it command and control. We know command and control doesn't work because that's productivity killer. So I think we ought to keep an eye on it, keep on building. Customers have to keep on building strong defense, do the best they can to avert, what could be pretty much a cyber attack tsunami over the next year or so and more.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of the challenge. I think we all face when you are well funded by a nation state, right? The resources they have will can pretty much outweigh all your investment as an enterprise, right? And that's kind of the biggest fear all of us have, right? And as defenders, I would say the odds are always against us. It takes one mistake from one person in a 100,000 person company and attackers are in, right? So it is definitely a tough job for sure. And the attackers in some sense have an upper hand. Yeah,
and look at this is just recency bias and there's nothing to do with nation state, but like one thing that you mentioned resonated well with me. It's just like, it just cost one mistake, right? Like what happened to Dropbox a week ago was very telling, when 120 plus of their code repos got stolen. And it was a really interesting social engineering attack where an email got sent out to a whole bunch of people and says, hey, your Circle CI configuration, which is a CI/CD tool, must be changed. Please enter your login and password. And sure enough, they had code access to everything. So it's just one mistake. And that's why sometimes, our customers get frustrated. It's like, we just bought all of this capability from you. It's like, yes, you did. We're trying to build more defense against this thing, but it's just, there's one mistake that somebody made and there's only so much you could do. Look, there are 30 million developers and less than 3 million security professionals right now. So it's just the odds are stacked up against them. And, you're trying to do the best you can to hire, but, to your point, it's just one small mistake.
Yeah. I think Gaurav was mentioning about this human detection response. Ultimately, at some point, it always boils down to the human factor. You can patch a computer, but you can't patch carbon, right? So that's kind of a very tough challenge, yeah. So I think talking about some of the VC trends right now, I think we're talking about some very interesting insights, Gaurav. So do you follow other VC trends as well, like in the industry? Like how a lot of people kind of go with the this is the big thing in the industry going on, and everybody makes a big bets, or do you take the contrarian view, or you kind of have your own thesis about going after investments, right? Because every fund has their own thesis and their own strategy. So how do you think about yourself compared to other peers in the industry?
The answer to that, Rahul, is yes and no, right? I think the overall macro trends are not too different. I think all the VCs are sort of tracking the same trends. We talked about software supply chain. We talked about an increased attack surface. So those kind of trends, shift left, those are not really different. Those are, most VCs look at the same trends. Some areas, as I mentioned, like the human detection response, Web3, blockchain security, those have been maybe overlooked by other VCs. So we also look for trends where we feel that other VCs might not be that focused on, but then we also do look at trends which are in the sort of broader, broader VC point of view, horizon. I think what changes for us and pretty much every VC is how they look at the trends, right? So the overall thesis might be the same, but within that, is there a viewpoint on the approach that's going to solve that problem, right? So there, I think we might have differences in how other VCs might be looking at a problem space. As a very simple example, we have invested in this company called Sonnet, and there's been a lot of activity recently around enterprise browsers, right? New secure enterprise browsers, bunch of funding rounds, but that's sort of also in the zero trust space. We just feel that that's a fundamentally flawed approach. Like, why would you want to install yet another browser? Browsers have a lot of security holes, and this is yet another thing to do for the CISO and to manage and update. So we invested in a very different approach, a company called Sonnet, that allows you to work with your existing browsers, but you don't have to install any agents. So, the approach might vary. That's, I think, where we differentiate, where any VC would differentiate, but the overall trends tend to be the same.
I see. Interesting. So sometimes, depending upon your conviction on the problem of where the market is going, you may take a contrarian view because you fundamentally don't believe that it aligns with your strategy. Okay.
I think the problem is the same. The problem area is the same, but how you solve it changes, right? I mean, a few years ago, we invested in this company called Acrix, which was one of the first shift-left cloud security posture management tools that we looked at. Back then, most of the CSPM tools that were getting funded were runtime tools. And so, the contrarian approach we took was that, hey, we need to fund a shift-left CSPM tool. Now, a lot more folks are doing that. But I think it's about how you do it that tends to be different, not the what.
Okay, very good. So, Ankur, a question to you. Like, you have been a successful entrepreneur and an executive for many years in the industry. And as you know that cybersecurity needs talent, right? In fact, I go out in schools and colleges and try to actually invite people to join the industry because we definitely have a deficit problem in terms of talent. So, what's your advice for upcoming talent in the industry? What do you think? What are the areas where they should focus on from a career perspective?
Yeah, look, I got into this accidentally, and so far I'm loving it. What is there not to love about the space and helping customers secure their, crown jewels? Look, I mean, if you are, the young people, the millennials, or Zoomers, or Gen X, or Gen Z, whatever that's called. Look, a lot of them are mission driven. Like I have kids, teenage kids, and they're very mission driven. And coming out of college or whatever, like your choices are like work on a productivity tool, like, or actually really work on security where you're trying to, save the country or the enterprise with their crown jewel. So you can be a lot more mission driven with the security type stuff. So that's for sure. Second thing is just from a career progression standpoint, pick a path, pick an industry where there are many companies, and we talked about the 3,000 companies. You don't like somewhere, go work somewhere else. I don't think I can say that about any other industry. So I think there's lots of career opportunity, things to move up, and it's a level playing field. If you have an engineering degree, great, but otherwise you can pick up some books and really learn and do some ethical hacking and get yourself like really an expert in this industry. So barriers to entry are low, lots of different paths to choose. It's mission driven, pays well. I think it does. But what is there not to like about it? So definitely, recommend youngsters to choose this career path. It's getting, more and more mainstream now. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice. And Gaurav, same question to you, but with a slight twist. Like, what is your advice? As you said, being a pro, if you have done a startup, you always have an edge over everybody else, right? For a first-time entrepreneur who's trying to get in the industry in cybersecurity, what are the things? What is your advice to them? How do you think they should go about building a company?
Yeah, I think Rahul, I'll start with the assumption that, especially in cybersecurity, the first-time entrepreneurs, the founders have good experience in the industry. They might have worked, in a larger organization like a Palo Alto Networks, and so I think that experience is really important. But what they need to learn from that experience is when they're starting a new company, there has to be significant innovation, right? It can't be a Me Too startup. It can't be just incremental innovation. Just as a very quick example, I see so many companies come out that are just helping prioritize alerts, security alerts, right? And so their pitch is, okay, we heard our customers that they have alert fatigue, there are too many notifications, it's hard to prioritize what to solve. And so we're just going to have the startup where AI is going to help prioritize. Now to me that seems like incremental innovation. It's just a minor feature on top of an existing platform. So as an entrepreneur, when you're thinking about starting a company, it has to be significant innovation for a significant problem, not just a feature of a larger platform. And I feel that a lot of folks, because their experience also skews them, they pick up this small problem that their current incumbent products are not helping, and they start a small startup around that very small focused feature, what I would call a feature. So I would encourage people to stay away from that kind of a mindset, really come up with something that's more comprehensive, more of a product, not a feature. Really has to be disruptive innovation. The innovation can be technical, it can be on your approach, how you're solving the problem, or the innovation can be around GTM as well, right? I mean, do you have a better insertion point? Maybe a particular segment of the market is unaddressed. Maybe the enterprise is getting all the love, but mid-market and SMBs are getting left behind. So it could be GTM innovation as well. So I think for entrepreneurs in security, that's really important, right? That difference between disruption and disruptive innovation and incremental innovation.
Okay, that's very thoughtful, great. So I think to continue on the same trend about people coming in the industry and education, right? So I kind of personally feel very much very strongly about this as well, because whatever I did in my grad school back in the days, like obviously it's been a long time, most of that is not relevant in the world today, right? And also, I have a feeling that we are not doing enough to educate people who are getting in the industry from a cybersecurity perspective. There's a lot of knowledge, but a lot of that is not really relevant for what's really practical out there in the field, right? Do you feel the same? Do you and do you think there should be a role by the larger organizations and investment firms to do something about it?
Yeah, look, I agree with your point, and I had like a bunch of interns and new grads who joined recently. It's like, hey, Ankur, can you suggest a book or your playbook and how to learn security or cybersecurity for dummies? And I'm like I read Stu McClure's classics back in the days, and to your point, they're not relevant anymore, right? I mean, first principles. I mean, you can learn some fundamentals. You are absolutely right. Like the basic, and again, I haven't seen it in Coursera. There are like the basic courses, etc., available. So I think there's a need to do that. For sure, if you're going into cloud security path, there are certifications to learn public cloud, then go through certification courses. I think that's another thing you could do. But by and large, I mean, you just find the right mentor who can kind of show you the way, give you a chance. Like I said, the entry barriers are pretty low. I'd hire anybody with any level of intelligence. We'll teach them how to do security. So that's sort of one thing. The second thing is that, like, I think we need to figure out across the globe how to export Israel. I don't know how to do it. Like somehow get like a whole bunch of Israelis to just move around the globe and just kind of like throw their pixie dust. There's something about the region that is just such a concentrated set of security talent. And a lot of them like learned in military and IDF, but just bottoms up, ground up, because they could see that. So I don't know what type of structure exists right now here, and maybe I'm aware and ignorant of that, but we could do more in general to generate more awareness, more education, more training. I've gone through security and compliance training. It's so basic in big corporation. We need to change those curriculums now. I don't have I agree with you. I don't have a lot of answers. I think industry as a whole needs to do something about it for sure.
Right. What do you think, Gaurav? What are your views about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with Ankur. It's hard to find sort of resources for security training. I think some universities are putting in some good programs as well. So, that's there. I think enterprises can also do a much better job in security training, not just for security experts, but obviously the general employee population as well. One of the things that I keep thinking about and would be a good startup idea is there like a Duolingo version, but for security, right? Sort of gamified security learning, plus at the same time, it's not just learning and training, but is it something that can actually also monitor everything that you're doing and just make sure that you're not getting fished when you shouldn't, like the Dropbox thing that Ankur was describing. So I think security training there's a lot of scope for improvement for sure.
Right.
And maybe it
There
needs
you go.
to start even sooner than college. It's becoming so important.
Yeah. So there you go. People who are listening, Gaurav just gave a fantastic idea which he's going to invest in, I suppose.
Yeah, I got my checkbook ready.
So yeah, no, I do agree. I think I do believe in the mission that we are all here to ultimately make things better and safer for everyone, and we do need the next generation to be prepared for the next era of threats as well. And I feel that we have we're not quite there, as a group, as a community, as an organization, right? So there's a lot more to be done there as well. So I think switching gears for a bit, I know we're kind of coming towards the end of the session in few. So, last 2 years have been fascinating, right? Like, who would have thought we would be in a pandemic in this day and age, right? Do you think that we are better off now? Do you think the next pandemic we can handle better in terms of infrastructure, in terms of handling it? Or do you think that it will be as painful as it was for all of us and more of a shock?
Oh gosh, no. I mean, I have to commend the resiliency of our species. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a chaos, it's hard to forget that we thrived and survived as the only species and reigned supreme across millions of different ones. And I think we are better prepared more so than ever before. Look, I mean, Lowe's, Home Depot came up with curbside pickup within 4 weeks of pandemic, thanks to public cloud. Just giving you a super small example, Instacart was able to hire tens of thousands of people to get food delivered in home. Technology as a enabler and a force for good, something Benioff says a lot. I just really believe in that. And look what the one thing that we thought was not like tech fight as much was like medicine and healthcare. And look at what we have done. I mean, telemedicine, our ability to, I mean, I'm sure the listeners know about this, but I think like we had the DNA of the virus or RNA stuff like figured out within weeks. And the first time in the history within a year, like we were able to get the COVID vaccine approved. So, I mean, yes, it was chaotic. It seemed chaotic, but when I look back in 2 years, economy thrived. Yes, unfortunate loss of lives that happened, and I hope it doesn't happen again, but I think we're better prepared than ever before. But that's just an optimist in me. That's how I think about it. And we did so in spite of what we had at the helm.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Gaurav? What are your views? Do you think we are better off?
No, I think we are definitely better off, right? I mean, to Ankur's point, technology has helped us a lot during that phase also. I mean, I remember during the complete shutdown, lockdown phase, and sort of our families in different countries couldn't even go to the market. We could just order delivery from them, right? Sitting here in Palo Alto. So, things are better. The only thing I would say, maybe a little different than Ankur is the human species also has a tendency to be complacent. And I just worry that sometimes we become complacent. I mean, unless we sometimes just don't do things until the shit hits the fan, if you will. So I just worry about that sometimes. But definitely, we are better off. I think the processes that are in place for dealing with such kind of a pandemic are definitely much better than before.
Yeah, I totally agree with you both. I think it was a crazy experience, a big learning experience, and we don't really want any more. Thanks, and but no thanks, right? But at the same time, this is one event where technology really came in together at people's help, right? It could be in biotech, it could be on the cloud, as you said, and we all stayed connected. Thank God for Zoom during the pandemic, right? So there are several things which really came out and shown despite all the challenges we all faced. So my last question, it's a little bit technical, but at the same time, cybersecurity is all about doomsday and something bad will happen, and a lot of this is theoretical. So do you think that there could be one event that worries you, or there's something that would really worry you that would shake the future foundation of the cybersecurity platforms we're building. It could be a big vulnerability in the cloud, for example, a cloud went down or something like that. What is it that you would worry about the most when it comes to a really big catastrophic cyber event?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm thinking, look, nation state attack, especially ones that can potentially compromise, everything that makes us who we are. I think that's a concern, and I know that's a loaded statement, but there are different ways. I think outside of that, look, because the world is so interconnected, whether we can call it we mean supply chain security in like CI/CD, but like if you think about supply chain, everything is so interconnected. Whether you talk about and we put things in nice boxes, IoT security and this security and cloud security, it's incredibly connected. If you were to wear our manufacturing, I mean, where cloud ends and starts and IoT ends, the lines are blurry. So I think that's what worries me sometimes. Can the electric grids and water supplies and financial stuff, all of that stuff can go down. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened so far. But in this interconnected world where everything is connected with everything else, so one mistake and really somebody who's highly motivated can do a lot of damage. But like I said, look, I'm an optimist. We've averted those types of tsunamis. We figured out a way, and humanity's better off thanks to obviously all the defense that the cybersecurity companies and the government provides. But that, again, just my perspective. Love to hear what Gaurav has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really given it a lot of thought, to be honest, I'm not sure I'm technical enough anymore to know if there's one single thing that can bring everything down. I believe that given the increasing amount of decentralization, systems are inherently more resilient than before. So even if a part of the system goes down, others are still running. But I would imagine a more catastrophic event would be one that would bring down basic infrastructure, utilities as an example, that could have some downstream effects on other activities as well. I think that could be more catastrophic. But how to see, given the increased amount of decentralization? I mean, I guess I'm old enough to remember Y2K, and that didn't happen.
Yes.
So,
yeah, no, I do agree. I mean, I think it kind of also boils down to whom I asked the same question to my son's one of my close friends' teenage son. Like, what would be the biggest cyber event for you? And he said, if my Instagram account got hacked, that is like the end of my world. I mean, so there are, it's all about perspective as well. But I do agree. Overall, we are far more resilient than ever before. Even though we talk about the cloud, it would be very hard to take down any cloud. There are a lot of thought process. People have been thinking about this proactively. We have learned a lot of lessons on the play. So I do feel much better. We have come across much further as an industry, as a group, than we have ever before, right? So on that note, let me see if there are any questions to take. Let me take a moment to see, and then I'll hand over back to Ravi. Let's see. Are there any questions?
It's
in the Q&A button, there are 4 questions.
Oh, yes, there you are. So is cybersecurity response part of the emerging security products? What are the challenges seen in this area?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Like, if it is going in the direction of remediation or response, there has been innovation in this area, what industry calls SOAR, security orchestration and automated response. There's always, and Palo Alto has a presence there, but there are a lot of other vendors who have that. It's definitely an area, but where customers are focused on how can we automate everything. Your average SOC has millions of alerts, and how could you whittle that down to a small numbers and then fully automate the workflow so that you're not like you get the human out of the equation. So yeah, if you're looking to, I don't know, start a company or join something, I think it's definitely an area. It's an interesting area for sure.
Yeah, I think we have seen some good innovation from startups in that area. Sort of, think of it as a next gen SOAR kind of a product where can the response be more automated? Can there be some kind of AI with human in the loop, so forth and so on. So I think it's an area of interest for sure.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Robert. Several years ago, it was somewhat an evidence that MSSPs would take over at least the SMB market. Has this happened? If not, why?
I'm not sure I have the latest market numbers, but we definitely see MSSPs as being very instrumental in the SMB market. I think it's really hard for SMBs to have the kind of expertise to onboard security products, security vendors. Very few security products can be used by businesses in a self-service fashion. So we see MSSPs as being pretty instrumental. A lot of our startups that address SMB markets tend to use MSSPs as resellers or distributors, especially in regions like Middle East, MENA, in Europe. MSSPs are pretty instrumental.
Yes.
Yeah,
I do concur.
They're relevant.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Kashyap.
Yeah.
Rahul.
No, I was just saying I do concur. I mean, SMB market definitely has been heavily influenced by MSSPs, and I see that actively in the industry, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because I know, as Gaurav said, the SMBs particularly are the most vulnerable. They don't have the 152 vendors they can fund and buy, right? So I would say there has been very good traction. I would be very curious to get some numbers there. I'll probably do some digging as well to get some facts. Sorry, Ankur. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I think you added a couple of things that I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, I guess the one contrarian view I have is that something to watch out is that we're increasingly going D2C, direct to consumer, and B2B. That trend. If what's the value that a middle tier adds? You have to always think about it. Customers like something that's easy, simple, directly versus like the middle tier. So something to watch out for. Like and this is a beyond SMB type of statement, right? Which is D2C. Go to the customer, self-service, product-led growth. These middle tiers, it'll be an interesting thing to watch for over the coming years.
Right. Okay. We have one more question from Kamesh. Which verticals and segments are you seeing significantly grow their spend on security?
Yeah, security, I think, I'm sure Ankur has a better view than me, but at least when I look at my startups, clearly high-tech companies are spending on security because, if you're a software company, security is mission critical to everything that you're doing and for your customers. Finance and healthcare are two verticals where we still see a lot of spend in security. I think those three kind of stand out for us right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with Gaurav, except that I think if you're public cloud, doesn't matter. Like every company is a digital company now. It's not a monopoly of technology company anymore. So everybody is a potential customer. So again, if you're a builder, like that kind of segmentation, it's not going to be very useful. But again, it depends on what problem are you trying to solve. It's very privacy and regulation and compliance related product. Then fintech or FinServe and healthcare may be more attractive.
Yeah, I would say I've seen a trend of manufacturing also getting more cybersecurity aware than ever before. It has always been traditionally it has been the financial services first leading the track, and then the healthcare and other folks follow. Manufacturing is one more area where at least I have seen a lot more traction as well to add to the list in terms of investments. Okay, we have one last question here, and it's perfectly on time. So as a consumer, I would be shocked if my iPhone gets hacked with no fault of me based on an Apple closed garden security track record.
I think that's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, I think sounds like something more like a comment. Okay. All right. I think with that, I'll probably hand it back to Ravi. Thank you, Gaurav and Ankur, for a wonderful afternoon. Great discussions. And thank you for the fantastic insights in this conversation.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Ravi and Rahul and Olivia and Gaurav. What a pleasure to have this conversation. We should do it again.
Absolutely.
I'll add my 2 cents on the segments. I think every other day you read about a massive hack related to crypto. So that seems like a good place. We have a company in the energy infrastructure, critical infrastructure space, Zage Security, and they're seeing massive sort of deployments because of the attacks. So thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Gaurav. I think Ankur had to drop off. So for joining today, we really appreciate the conversation, and a recording of this will be made available by Olivia.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you, Rahul, Gaurav, and Ankur for participating. And then I'll send out the recording link to everyone, and it'll also be available on our YouTube channel. So make sure to follow us there. But aside from that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you again, and have a great afternoon and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.